Kia ora everyone, welcome back to Unlearn with Bianca. If you're tuning in for the first time, then welcome. On this podcast, we explore everything around self-healing, health, personal growth, the mind-body connection, relationships, and more. Hey guys, I'm back. I hope everyone is well. I hope everyone's having a good week so far. Today, we've got an episode around healing chronic illness and ongoing chronic symptoms. Now, having worked with many people who have shifted chronic symptoms and in many cases fully recovered, plus my own journey after recovering from chronic pain, I want to, in this episode, share some commonalities that all of these people have. So some common underlying mindsets that I've noticed for people that heal. The word heal is an interesting one, actually. I use it quite typically in podcasts and when I'm speaking on chronic illness and that kind of thing. But actually, I want to start by sharing what I actually mean by that. So healing is actually an ongoing process. It's not a destination, it's the journey. Cliche, I know it sounds cliche, but it is an ongoing process. When I'm referring to chronic illness and chronic symptoms, healing for me personally is when someone reaches this place where their symptoms are not chronic, meaning that they're not dealing with them day in, day out, and there's no fear around them. So take, for example, I know I'm already going off on a tangent here, but take, for example, me healing chronic pain. I may still experience pain at some point when I have a virus. I had some with COVID, perhaps a stressful period in my life. There might be naturally a few aches and pains and headaches and that kind of thing. But I trust that this won't result in anything ongoing and chronic. So wanted to clarify that is what I'm referring to when I say healing from chronic illness. Basically, it's living a life where we feel like we have freedom around our physical state and in our emotional state. I also think it's really important to state that there are so many different avenues to healing. There's changing the diet, medication, all sorts of things. But this episode is going to be more relevant to those that feel like they have exhausted all options. And the symptoms they are experiencing are ongoing and they are persisting. The tests that they have done by medical professionals are coming back relatively normal. So a lot of these conditions and symptoms are things like chronic pain, chronic fatigue, long COVID, IBS, POTS, skin conditions, anxiety, headaches, migraines. These are things I see a lot with my lightning process work, and these are the chronic symptoms I'm referring to. That is usually when they start exploring a nervous system approach. So if you're new here, I had my own healing story with chronic pain. I used to experience chronic pain for about 3 years. This was around 10 years ago now. I actually did an episode on it, episode 2. So if you go all the way back to the start of this podcast, you'll hear me talk a little bit about my health journey. So I won't go into it too much, but I had tried everything, and I'm telling you, everything, pain clinics, operation, supplements, diet changes, medication, everything, the works, specialists, before I came across nervous system work and a brain and nervous system approach to healing chronic illness. I really empathize for those dealing with ongoing symptoms and chronic illness because it is such a difficult experience when you feel so helpless. I know how small your world can become because you spend so much time and energy trying to manage these symptoms. And it's a scary experience as well. I have seen clients who have gone from being immobile, who have gone from being out of work, not being able to be parents, all sorts of situations, to fully getting their health back again. So I want to reassure you before you start that it is my belief that we have this innate self-healing capability and capacity that is far beyond what most of us realize. Chances are, if you are listening to this episode, then you either are experiencing symptoms yourself, or you know someone that is experiencing symptoms, or you're just interested. But either way, I want to give you that hope because in the last 10 years, I have noticed, I've been doing this work for about 5 years. It's been 10 years since I've been well. But in the last 10 years, there has been a huge shift in the way that we view the importance of the nervous system and the importance of the brain in terms of our health. Unfortunately, though, sometimes things take a little bit longer to trickle down into our mainstream systems. So if you think about the health system, if you think about the education system and what they teach at university to even become, say, a GP, all of these things take a bit of time to trickle down. And that means that although a lot of people are understanding more about the nervous system, and although there is a lot of hope out there, although a lot of people are talking about these types of concepts, it doesn't necessarily mean that mainstream practices have caught up just yet. So there is still some resistance to mind-body healing, to the nervous system, and the importance in terms of healing from chronic illness. But I do believe, and I've been pretty on the mark with this because I said this 5 years ago, but I believe in 5 years from now, this stuff will be mainstream. So we're ahead of the game. If you're taking a nervous system and a brain-centered approach to healing chronic illness, you are ahead of the game. And I hope this episode brings you some hope. I hope that you can also listen to this episode with some curiosity, just to get curious about your current beliefs and where you sit. I'm really here to challenge you, to get you just thinking outside the box a little bit, because trust me when I say I was this person 10 years ago, or just over 10 years ago. If anyone had slightly implied for me to look at brain retraining or nervous system work, or slightly implied that this pain was in my head, then trust me, they were getting told to fuck off straight away. I was not having a bar of it. I really had to get to this point where I was completely desperate, which I'll talk about soon, before I really opened up to different approaches. So listen to this episode with curiosity, and I hope you enjoy it. Okay, so the commonalities of people that I see recover from chronic illness and ongoing chronic symptoms. Number one, they are curious and open to expanding what they have been told or shown. So this one is really important. It takes a lot of tenacity, a lot of willpower to be consistently staying in this zone of hope. And I get it, because if you are someone who's dealing with health issues and stuck in their health, and you are going from appointment to appointment and you're told they've run out of options, that they don't know what to do, or just that you're going to have to manage your condition, it starts to get really draining, and you can start to become really helpless if you're not in a good space. And often it just becomes harder and harder to trust that something out there is going to work. So the people that I find get well, they get to this point where they are open to exploring more than what they've been told. And unfortunately, a lot of people I see, a lot of clients I see, they get to this point, I mean, unfortunate, but also fortunate at the same time. Unfortunate because it often takes so long for them to get to this point, but they realize that perhaps one medical professional does not have all the answers. And this actually goes against what we're led to believe. Like, go to the doctor, take the pill, do the protocol, do the routine, everything will work out fine. But if we're dealing with chronic illness, that's usually not the case. So, yeah, people get to this point where they realize that the answer isn't necessarily one pill or one operation. And it's a really hard realization. It is a really hard realization because we start to lose trust in what we've known. But then they get to this place where they realize that perhaps there is room to take a more active role in their own recovery. There is this quote, I'm going to butcher it because I can't remember it word for word, but it's something around, it is insanity. Oh God, I don't know if I'm saying this right, but it is insanity to do the same thing over and over again and expect different results. And this is exactly it. So I really admire the people that reach out to me and take the first step at applying for the lightning process, or just learning more information about a nervous system and brain-based approach to healing, because it is typically people that have looked outside the box and decided nothing else seems to be helping to the degree I want it to help. And therefore, I'm going to look for a new way to approach this issue or this problem, this situation. So often we like to distill things down into black and white. We like to categorize things. And in the Western society, we have done exactly the same when it comes to approaching our health. Indigenous Eastern cultures, they don't really have the same outlook on health and healing as we do in the Western society, which in my personal opinion is completely backwards, and we've got it all wrong. But I won't go down that tangent. But basically what we do is we separate the mind and the body. So when we're thinking about illness, a lot of us have this assumption that if there's something physically wrong, and I'm just saying it for the sake of this podcast, such as a sore arm or fatigue, it appears as a physical symptom. Therefore, you would go to the doctor or you would go to a specialist to look at that area in your body to assess it from that physical standpoint. If you were dealing with mental health symptoms such as anxiety, you would go to a counselor or a psychologist and they would explore what was going on for you emotionally and mentally, but they may not have the same ability to be able to help you really understand what's going on at that physical level, or how something like anxiety can also lead to symptoms of IBS. So when it comes to illness, we cannot separate the mind and the body. And people that get well, they really start to understand this, that to heal, the best shot at healing we can have is when we look from a biological perspective, a social perspective, a psychological perspective, emotional, neurological, all of it together. Because what goes on mentally impacts us physically. What goes on physically impacts us mentally. We cannot separate the mind and the body. So when we can acknowledge this and see that illness is really multifaceted, symptoms are really multifaceted, then we have a better chance at healing. The second thing that I see in people who heal, they shift their mindset from I am broken to understanding that the nervous system has done an overly good job at protecting them and adapting, and now they are stuck. And I say stuck because that is different than being innately broken. And I get that when we are dealing with health issues, it can feel like our body is failing us or our mind is failing us. It can feel like we are broken, but this is not true. I truly believe that research and knowledge is power. And when people can understand the concept of something called allostatic load on the nervous system, they will start to make sense of, and they'll start to understand what a dysregulated nervous system means and how it can actually impact health. By the way, when I say the nervous system is basically the highway, the communication between the mind and the body. So I want you to think of the nervous system and the body just like a bridge. What we know about bridges is they can only sustain so much of a load before they start to creak and eventually give way. And it is the same with our nervous system. Our nervous system can only hold so much of a load before symptoms start to pop up. And when we're looking at a mind-body approach to healing or a nervous system-based approach to healing, what we really want to be doing is, and the goal here is to reduce the allostatic load off the nervous system. Like I said, there are so many ways to do this. We can look at eliminating toxins, changing the diet, looking at removing or limiting any toxic chemicals on the system, any environmental pollutants in the environment, reducing stress. And really importantly, one that a lot of people don't place enough emphasis on is looking at ways we can reduce trauma and also reduce the mental stress. Because, living with ongoing symptoms is stressful. There is a lot of fear associated with living with symptoms because you're trying to manage these symptoms, right? There's a lot of brain pathways that become strengthened over time because people are worried about what their health is going to look like in the future. They're worried about managing day to day. They're worried about the stress it puts on relationships. There's all sorts of thoughts that we're having that are consistently flooding the body of these stress hormones. not only can thoughts really change the physiology in our body and keep that load on the nervous system, a lot of people have traumas and the energy stuck in the body from past traumas that are also keeping this load on the nervous system. So the nervous system and the brain start responding as if there's still a threat. If you go back to one of my earlier podcasts, I do a whole episode on the nervous system 101, which would be really interesting if you're interested in this. But basically, the point I want to get at is you're not broken. Your nervous system has adapted overly well. That is my belief if you're stuck with ongoing symptoms. And it has become really good at protecting you. But we need to find ways to reduce this allostatic load. And again, it comes back to looking at all sorts of areas, mental, emotional, physical, the whole picture. Sometimes people say to me, yeah, I get what you're saying, but I had COVID, so there is like a virus in my system, or I had glandular fever, and that's when the fatigue started. And I agree with that completely. That makes so much sense. But what else was loaded on your nervous system before you even had that virus? Chances are there might have been other stuff going on. And then when you start to get new symptoms, your mental thoughts kick in, the fear kicks in, your body's chemistry changes. There's a whole lot of different stuff going on. It still comes back to a dysregulated nervous system and a nervous system that is perceiving a threat when the threat is no longer there. I really believe that symptoms are our body's way of communicating that something is out of balance. But for so many of us, we resent these symptoms. We try and suppress these symptoms. But if we really look at them and we just see it as a signal that the system's out of balance, that is where we can start to open up to more healing. Number 3, the people that start to heal, they are the ones that start to challenge and shift their beliefs and detach from the illness identity. I cannot say this enough. Belief, when it comes to healing, the power of belief is huge. And something that really frustrates me is when clients come to me again, helpless, feeling hopeless, because they have been told time and time again, this is just something you're going to have to manage. And I'm so proud of them that they've ended up with me again, because somewhere within they have said, no, there has to be another way. But for a lot of people, if we're not in a good space to hear negative information, that sticks. The brain has a negative bias, and the brain will start filtering reality through those beliefs that somebody else has told us about our health. So the people that get well, they have this inner knowing that there must be more, and I am going to look for evidence that healing is possible. Where are these people hanging out? What are they talking about? Where are these recovery stories? I always encourage people that want to heal to look for people that have done it before them, because there is so much evidence that we can heal ourselves. There are so many stories of people that have had these amazing recoveries, but we have to be in that realm to find them. A lot of the time, people are spending time in these recovery support groups, which, hey, they serve a purpose. But after a while, if you're looking at, people that are really stuck, if you're reading their posts, if you're looking at their beliefs, that can start to rub off and you can start to lose hope. So we have to be really careful. I'm saying we, as in anyone listening out there who needs to hear this, you have to be really careful. If people are telling you recovery is not possible, you need to take it with a grain of salt. I was really young when I had chronic pain. And if it wasn't for my mum and my dad that said, like, hey, just keep going, keep looking in different directions and we'll get there. If it wasn't for them, I really feel like I would have given up. I would have just taken a diagnosis, because I had quite a few, and just taken that as fact and continued operating within that realm. So if you want to heal, start finding stories of hope and recovery. Start looking at your beliefs, your own beliefs, and belief statements are often like, I believe or I am. start investigating those and seeing which ones are not aligning with who you want to be. You might not be at the place where you believe that healing every symptom, chronic symptom, is currently possible. However, you might believe that you are open to learning more and finding more evidence of people that have healed before you. So it's really about challenging ourselves and just taking that one step forward in the right direction. And I feel really strongly about this because the amount of times my clients have been told that recovery is not an option, full recovery is not an option, or that they'll just have to manage their symptoms and try a different medication and stay on that forever, and then they go on to recover. Yeah, it actually really frustrates me because this is coming from people who have a lot of authority in their realm and respect. And I know people are only doing the best with what they can do and what they know. But I think we've just got to be really careful with our words and how we give and receive information. Because let's say I'm somebody with chronic fatigue and I'm told you're going to have to manage your condition for the rest of your life. I then will start filtering my world through that lens. I'll start saying things like, I have chronic fatigue syndrome. This is a lifelong condition. There is no cure. And my brain starts to filter in that direction. It starts to build evidence in that direction. And therefore, healing becomes more and more out of reach. Plus, those thoughts are just not very nice thoughts in itself. So therefore, they tip the nervous system into more of a stress response. And that can result in more symptoms. And then we get into this vicious cycle. So there is a lot to it. And our belief is super important because it leads into what we identify with and what labels we carry around. The people that get well, they understand this, and they understand that if they are experiencing symptoms, and I will add here as well, I think there's some merit and some positives in receiving a label and a diagnosis because sometimes it can give clarity, it can make you feel seen and heard and validated, and I think that's really important when it comes to moving through chronic illness. But the issue is when you get the label and then there's no clear path to recovery and then they just tell you it's something you have to manage forever. That is when I no longer think it's a useful thing to carry around. And that is where I think some people get stuck because it becomes a part of them. So the people that heal, they realize that rather than it being a part of them, it is a process, it's a set of symptoms that are currently occurring. Okay, the next one, people that heal and recover from chronic symptoms, they have an image of where they want to head, what they want their life to look like when they make it to the other side. And I know this one sounds really simple and it's like, yeah, well, of course, I don't want to be dealing with these chronic symptoms. So of course, like, I just want to be living my life again. I want it to be how it used to be. But you'd be surprised when people have been stuck for a while and I say to them, like, what do you want? Sometimes there's just a blank stare. It's like, I have no idea. This has become my reality. It's hard to connect to what life would actually look like without these symptoms. And I was the same. Before I did the lightning process, I had to write down some goals of what I wanted to do after I became well, with the intention of becoming well and having comfort back again. So I wrote down traveling overseas, living overseas, preferably in London or in Europe, getting in a relationship. I wrote these big things, but I remember as I was writing them, my hand was literally shaking because I thought, how am I going to do this? This is the first time I had allowed myself to really think about the future in a positive light. Because I had been so stuck for so long, it really at that point felt out of reach. But when I just gave myself permission to think, what would life look like in an ideal situation? If I had my health back, if I had complete comfort, what could be possible? That is what really fueled this fire in me, that I want my health back. I have a why. I want to connect to why I'm doing this. And this is something that can so easily be forgotten when you're stuck because all your mental energy is going into the day-to-day, into managing the symptoms. So if you're listening and, you are stuck with chronic symptoms, what would life look like in an ideal situation if you were completely well again? How would you be acting? What would you be doing? How would you be feeling? These are really important questions to ask yourself. Even if you are just noting down a few bullet points of what life might look like, because so often when I ask people, they just say, I don't want this. I don't want this pain. I don't want this anxiety. But they haven't yet connected with their why. What is driving them? How do they want life to look? When we have an image, then we can start working towards that. When we have a goal, then we can start working towards that. If we haven't got a goal and we can't see where we're going, it's a lot harder for us to motivate ourselves to do the practices to get well, and also just harder to stay on track. So yeah, the people that get well, they've got a why. They're like, I want to do it for my kids. I want to do it because I can see myself stepping into this new job. I want to do it so that I can run a marathon. Whatever it is, they are connecting to the future version of themselves and they are holding that in their vision. All right, the next one, people that heal, they understand that it doesn't just happen. It's not a magic cure. Healing and getting our health back, it takes patience. It takes consistency. I like to describe the type of brain retraining and nervous system work I do, like taking your brain and your nervous system to the gym. If you go to the gym and you just, you go a few times a month and you're sort of dipping your toes in and out, you are not really going to be building your muscle mass. It takes consistent showing up daily or every few days and putting in the work. And it is the same when we are retraining the brain. It's the same when we're doing nervous system regulation practices. It takes consistency. When we work with the brain and the signals it's sending via the nervous system into the body, we're utilizing something called neuroplasticity. And neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to be retrained based on how it is used. So for the brain to change, it takes consistency. And the brain will naturally have a more negative bias. It's going to go down pathways that keep you safe and protected. So it takes some time to retrain it, to signal different thoughts, to change these automated responses until these new automated pathways. So I always like to tell my clients that for some people, they see quite quick changes. For other people, it takes a bit longer. It doesn't really matter how long it takes. You just have to have this mindset of, if I put in the work, if I show up every day, if I'm consistent, if I'm compassionate, change is inevitable. But it's not some miracle cure and it's not some overnight fix, because it takes self-responsibility. And unfortunately, that is the hardest bit, but it's also the most rewarding bit, because if you realize, wow, I actually have more influence on my health than I was led to believe, then you feel like you have more power in general. You show up, you start to show up in a different way because you realize your innate power. So the people that get change, they know it takes work. They're committed to getting their health back and doing what it takes to get their health back. And therefore, they are committed to themselves. And the last one, I have noticed that people who heal and recover, they are willing to find and forge a new relationship with themselves, especially self-compassion. And they are also willing to look at the way that they process emotions. Because what is not talked about enough is the role of emotions and the way we process emotions, and how our emotions can, they say, get stuck in the body, but essentially, again, it's this energy, this stress response energy from not processing emotions that can impact our nervous system and keep it in a stress response. So yeah, to really heal, it takes us being able to, number one, be compassionate towards ourselves, and number two, make sure that we have ways and we understand how to express emotions. I notice the people that heal, they are able to look at and acknowledge what we would consider difficult emotions, yet they have some tools to also move through these emotions so they're not staying in the emotions as well, which can also trigger the stress response. So the people that heal, there is a balance that they tend to work on between feeling and acknowledging emotions, but also having some strategies and some tools to also shift out into more useful states when need be. And I think that's what we should all be aiming for. I've said this on a podcast before, but chronic illness can really force us to look inwards and force us to look at how we are dealing with our emotions and how we talk to ourselves. Because I'll say it one more time, if we're constantly beating ourselves up, our nervous system perceives that just the same as if we were getting yelled at by a bully. And it's not good for our health, it's not good for our stress response, and it can keep us stuck in that sympathetic state where we can't heal. So guys, this has been quite a quick episode. I hope that you found it really insightful, and I know I haven't gone into a whole lot of depth, so if you do want me to expand on any point, you're welcome to message me, get in touch on Instagram, and I can shed some more light. If you take one thing from this podcast, I want you to remember that healing is possible. We have this innate ability to return to what is called homeostasis. We are more powerful, our bodies and our minds are more powerful than we are led to believe. And I will say that although chronic illness for me was absolutely shit, I hated every minute of having pain. It was, looking back now, one of the most transformative things I had to move through. It forced me to be more of myself, to work on and let go of patterns that were keeping me stuck, that were keeping my nervous system stuck in this stress response, that were no longer serving me. It forced me to look at where I could take influence. It was never my fault for becoming ill or having symptoms, but it was my subconscious mind and body directing me to do the work so I could be well. If you're looking for support on your healing and recovery journey, please do get in touch, because it's so much easier to do this work when we've got somebody keeping us accountable. We've got connection, we've got someone that understands the journey. And chronic illness and trauma, it can often disconnect us from ourselves and other people as well. So if you're feeling isolated on this journey, there are so many people that have walked this path before you and so many people that are able to support you. If I could go back and talk to my younger self that was going through the trenches with chronic pain, I would tell that version of me that eventually it will make more sense, that you will come out the other side, and that will just be a blip along your timeline. And I hope that whoever needs to hear that message today, they really connect to that and keep faith in what is possible. You will get there. I hope you all have a beautiful week ahead. And as always, please follow, please rate this podcast. Please let me know how you found it. I've had some really nice messages in the last few weeks, and it's funny because someone actually said something around me making concepts really easy to understand, which was my favorite message, because I have this thing where I feel like I struggle to make concepts easy to understand. It's something I'm really working on. A lot of the information sits in my head, so when I can really distill it into simple terms, I find that's really what I want to do, and I'm working on more. So I appreciate the comments. I appreciate you guys when you reach out. It's always nice to hear from you. Anyway, have a beautiful week, and I'll see you on the next episode.